Anchorage Daily Times, April 4, 1917. HeadlinesThruHistory blocks resolution. Germany will neither declare nor wage war on United States. HeadlinesThruHistory blocks quick action on the war resolution. Senate to sit until it passes. Washington, April 4th. HeadlinesThruHistory yesterday blocked the efforts of the Senate to rush the consideration of the war resolution through the upper house of the Congress. The Committee on Foreign Relations reported out a resolution, slightly changed and strengthened from the original flood resolution, but in full accord with the suggestions made by the President in his address to the joint session. Senator Hitchcock, in charge of the resolution, asked unanimous consent for its immediate consideration, whereupon HeadlinesThruHistory made objection, thus delaying for another day at least the passage of the resolution. Senator Martin of Virginia, Democratic floor leader, refused to consent to the consideration of any other business until the resolution is passed, and the Senate adjourned until 10 o'clock this forenoon. It is believed that the resolution will pass today, as the great majority of senators are in favor of it. Great speech by Hitchcock, who is charge of war resolution. Washington, April 4th. When the Senate convened at 10 o'clock this forenoon, Senator Hitchcock, in charge of the war resolution, took the floor to explain the measure. He said, in part, "The time for action is at hand. The time for discussion has passed. The President has stated clearly and accurately the reasons which make this great step necessary. This resolution provides for war against the Imperial German government. It is unquestionably a declaration of war. I am impressed with the solemnity of the occasion. Some seem to enjoy the prospect of war. To me, it is depressing and dreadful. The enormous cost the people must pay, the increase in the cost of prospect of war. The awful sacrifice of life sickens my heart. We have nothing material to gain by victory. We want no territory. We want no indemnity. We have no historic grudge to settle. We have no racial antipathies to gratify. We are going to war to vindicate our honor and our independence as a great nation. Such quarrel as we have with Germany was not of our own seeking. It was forced upon us." Steering Committee of Senate plans to check any filibustering. Washington, April 4th. The Senate Steering Committee decided on a course of action yesterday afternoon that is calculated to defeat the efforts of the little group of willful men headed by HeadlinesThruHistory, who are seeking to block congressional endorsement of the President's policy, as outlined in his address to the joint session, and dealing with the German situation. The Senate met at 10 o'clock this forenoon, and the Steering Committee's plan is that it shall be kept in continuous session until favorable action is taken on the Flood-Martin resolution endorsing the President's course. A round robin was circulated among the senators last evening and night, the signers pledging themselves to keep the Congress in continuous session until the resolution is disposed of. This plan will effectually quash the little group that are opposing it. Former Presidents Roosevelt and Taft pay tribute to Wilson message to National Congress. Washington, April 4th. Former President Theodore Roosevelt, just before entering the White House to congratulate President Wilson on his great, patriotic message to the Congress, said yesterday to a group of newspaper men, "President Wilson's message to the Congress will rank among the foremost state papers of which the Americans are justly proud. The point to be emphasized in the message is that we strike as hard, as soon and as effectively as possible and wage an aggressive warfare against the German government." Great historical state paper. New Haven, Connecticut, April 4th. Commenting on President Wilson's message to the Congress, former President William H. Taft said yesterday, "The President's message is a great historical paper. Germany will not declare war nor take any steps to wage war." Berlin, April 4th. The press reports of the message of President Wilson reached Berlin yesterday. It is declared here that there will be no change in the German attitude. Even if the American Congress adopts the views of the President, Germany will not declare war or make any attempt to wage war on the United States. The indiscriminate submarine campaign will be continued, but this, declare government officials, is not directed against the United States any more than it is directed against any other neutral nation.
Albuquerque Morning Journal, April 4th, 1917. Congress certain to declare state of war exists. LaFollette blocks immediate action by Senate on resolution. Uncle Sam, I know this job. I've done it before. The president's address makes epic in world England holds. Message of democracy may be dropped in Germany from Allies' aeroplanes instead of bombs. Wilson's utterance equals Lincoln's best. America is entering war for purpose of liberating humanity, is view taken by London's newspapers. London, April 3rd, 11:45 p.m. President Wilson's message aligning the United States with the nations fighting against Germany was warmly welcomed and unanimously acclaimed by the British people. They recognized that no decision with a weightier influence upon the result of the world's struggle has been given since Great Britain, after a few days of consideration, resolved to march with France. No news of the last year has so stirred the country, save only the Russian Revolution. There have been no street demonstrations or exhibitions of excitement, such as the first weeks of the war saw in London, because the war has long since passed the state of excitement. The substance and tone of the president's message was an electrifying surprise. The directness of his indictment of the German methods and his wholehearted statement of America's duty to maintain her right and of her duty to civilization was more than the public here expected. Dispatches from America in the last month had represented the president as so reluctant to enter the war that recommendation to Congress limited to defensive measures for the protection of American commerce would have fulfilled the general expectations. Russian Revolution helps. That the Russian Revolution did much to pave the way for American cooperation with Germany's opponents and made President Wilson's policy possible, is one of the first features of the situation which the newspaper sees upon. The only feature of President Wilson's message that evokes dissent is his acquittal of the German people from responsibility for the policies of the German government. Liberal papers, like the Daily Chronicle, contend that the German people have supported with apparent enthusiasm such proceedings as have been going on in Belgium. The heads of the government consider that courtesy requires that they withhold comment until the American situation has developed further and the voice of Congress has been heard. Premier Lloyd George will move a resolution in the House of Commons as soon as he thinks it fitting. But the members registered their sentiments in applause when President Wilson's message was mentioned in the House today. The American colony is enthusiastic over the news. May drop news in Germany. Intense interest centers upon the reception of the news by the Germans. It is considered questionable here whether the German papers will be permitted to print the text in full. An official has suggested that British airplanes could do more effective work in scattering the message behind the German lines than by dropping bombs. The Daily Chronicle, giving its editorial the unusual honor of leaded type and double-column breadth, with the caption, "America at War." Will. Continued on page 2. Germany refuses to make war on United States, but will continue to kill Americans on high seas. By Morning Journal Special Leased Wire. Berlin, April 3rd, via London, April 4th, 2:15 a.m. The press report of President Wilson's State of War message reached Berlin at 10 o'clock this morning. It is declared here that there would be no change in the German attitude, even if Congress adopted President Wilson's views. Germany will not declare war nor take any step to wage war against the United States. The submarine war will be continued as it has been conducted since February 1st, but this, declare the officials, is not directed more against the United States than any other neutral. It also is declared that there will be no change in the treatment of American citizens in Germany, who now have the same freedom as all other neutrals. But Germany expects that the United States will continue the same treatment of Germans in that country.
The Daily Naum Industrial Workers, April 4th, 1917. Remain in continuous session, Congress to grant all Wilson demands. Washington, D.C., April 3rd. Everything that Wilson asked will be granted by Congress. A Senate committee amendment strengthened the flood war resolution declaring that a state of war which has been forced by Germany and thrust upon the United States is hereby formally declared. The resolution further asserts that the President is hereby authorized and directed to employ the entire naval and military forces of the United States, as well as the other reserves, so that the government may carry on the war against the Imperial German government, and to bring the conflict to a successful termination all the resources of the country is hereby pledged. Chairman Stone of the Foreign Relations Committee cast the only dissenting vote against the war resolution. In the Senate, La Follette objected to an immediate consideration of the resolution, and as a unanimous vote is necessary, the Senate, amid bitter and noisy wrangling, adjourned, the war supporters denouncing and even trying to assault the senator from Wisconsin. Since morning, the House had been waiting to concur in the Senate resolution, but owing to the collapse of its acceptance, they then adjourned. In the adjournment resolution of the Senate, it was agreed that the Senate should remain in continuous session until the war measures are passed, thus to make useless any filibustering may take place.
Audubon County Journal, April 5, 1917. Real patriotism. $535 million for national defense. War declared on a ruthless enemy. Like the bounding of a rubber ball did our Congress respond to the call of our president to assemble, to provide for existing emergencies over which he had no control. After over 200 precious American lives have been lost and hundreds of tonnage of American vessels have been sunk in commerce trade by enemy submarine, our administration asks of Congress the right to stop its further destruction of life and property. That right is about to be granted in ways and means provided for its purpose. So we can now consider the dear old United States at war with an enemy. The patience of our administration has been exhausted. Promises given have been broken, and nothing but war seems adequate. Let us hope for a speedy termination.
French Broad Hustler, April 5, 1917. State of war has been declared, country rapidly moving men. President Wilson determined to use total resources in fighting Germany. Washington, April 4th. President Wilson Monday urged Congress assembled in joint session to declare a state of war existing between the United States and Germany. In a dispassionate, but unmeasured, denunciation of the course of the Imperial German government, which he characterized as a challenge to all mankind and a warfare against all nations, the president declared that neutrality no longer was feasible or desirable where the peace of the world was involved, that armed neutrality had become ineffectual enough at best and was likely to produce what it was meant to prevent, and urged that Congress accept the gauge of battle with all the resources of the nation already warring on us. I advise that the Congress declare the recent course of the Imperial German government to be in fact nothing less than war against the government and people of the United States, said the President, that it formally accept the status of belligerent, which has thus been thrust upon it, and that it takes steps not only to put the country in a more thorough state of defense, but also to exert all its power and employ all its resources to bring the government of the German Empire to terms and end the war. Important plans. The most important plans under preparation by the administration include enlistment by selective conscription of young men for a national army, in addition to the regular establishment and National Guard in increments of 500,000. Until enough have been trained to make certain the defeat of Germany, organization of the nation's commercial interests for economical and effective distribution of commodities among the civilian population, rapid provision of adequate means of combating the submarine menace. The raising of a very large sum of money, as much as possible to be obtained by taxation, and the definite amount of the first budget not to be fixed until the exact needs of the Army and Navy and of the Entente Allies are ascertained. Washington, April 3rd. Administration plans for raising an army on the principle of universal liability to serve to be submitted Congress as soon as the pending war resolution is adopted, are based on selective conscription of young men to be summoned to the colors as rapidly as they can be trained and officered. A detailed scheme for the registration of eligibles has been worked out. After married men, others with dependents, and those whose service is required in industries have been exempted. Others within the age limits fixed will be examined physically, and those found fit will be selected, possibly by lot, until the first 500,000 to be trained are secured. Hendersonville is fully alive to the situation, and in various ways citizens are expressing themselves of the inevitable war in which this country is to have with Germany. The very morning that Congress met in extraordinary session, telegrams were sent from this city to President Wilson signed by representative citizens urging the President and Congress to wage a determined war upon Germany until peace with victory over Barbarizo is accomplished. F. E. Kurtz, a patriotic citizen, although past the age limit for the Army, expects to do duty in the military hospital corps when this country needs him, secured the names to the telegram printed below. He found in the canvass for various representatives of different business and professions that the entire neighborhood is thoroughly convinced that the menace of a brutal and pitiless German domination with its withering effect upon civilization must be faced by the United States, and that the business of making war, dreadful as it is to contemplate, must be pushed with the utmost vigor. The following is a copy of the telegram sent, Hendersonville, North Carolina, March 21st. To Woodrow Wilson, President of the United States. Washington, D.C. As citizens of the United States, we are shocked and horrified at the deliberate and savage murder of American men and women and children by Germany, and we are intensely indignant over the accumulation of insult and humiliation heaped upon our country. We urge you and Congress to wage determined war upon that nation until peace with victory over German barbarism is accomplished. Hendersonville displays the stars and stripes. The American flag is flying from a large number of business houses, private residences, public buildings, and countless automobiles in Henderson County. The county is showing the world that it stands back of the silent man in Washington who is bearing the brunt of this national crisis, and that when the roll call for volunteers is cried, there will not be a missing man to the colors. Patriotism is running high. One company of soldiers, the 6th Coast Artillery, is recruiting to war strength and has been ordered to the armory Friday night. The Hendersonville Light Infantry has already started to be organized this week. Over 40 boys and men have signed already. Still other companies will leave from Old Henderson County soon after war is declared. Flags up. Then citizens. The Star-Spangled Banner, oh long may it wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Elk Mountain Pilot, April 5, 1917. War declared with Germany by Congress today.
Abilene Weekly Reflector, April 5, 1917. Wilson declares that the nation must wage war with Germany. Strong language in address to Congress. Raise 1,200,000 men for Army. La Follette holds up resolution a day. Threatens filibuster later. Resolution before Congress declares state of war and calls for strongest possible efforts to help allies. Senate War Resolution. Whereas the Imperial German government has committed repeated acts of war against the government and the people of the United States of America, therefore be it resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America, in Congress assembled, that the state of war between the United States and the Imperial German government, which has thus been thrust upon the United States, is hereby formally declared, and that the President be, and he is hereby authorized and directed, to employ the entire naval forces of the United States and the resources of the government to carry on war against the Imperial German government, and to bring the conflict to a successful termination. All of the resources of the country are hereby pledged by the Congress of the United States. Washington, April 5th. The war resolution was passed by the Senate last night by a vote of 82 to 6. It goes to the House at 10 o'clock to continue until action is taken. Senators who cast the negative votes were Grena of North Dakota, La Follette of Wisconsin, Norris of Nebraska, Lane of Oregon, Stone of Missouri, and Vardaman of Mississippi. The resolution, drafted after consultation with the State Department and already accepted by the House Committee, says the state of war thrust upon the United States by Germany is formally declared, and directs the President to employ the entire military and naval forces and the resources of the government to carry on war and bring it to a successful termination. Action in the Senate came just after 11 o'clock at the close of a debate that had lasted continuously since 10 a.m. The climax was reached late in the afternoon, when Senator John Sharp Williams denounced a speech by Senator La Follette as more worthy of her von Bethmann-Hollweg than of an American senator. Washington, April 3rd, 3:30 p.m. By exercising his prerogative under the rules, Senator La Follette delayed consideration of the war resolution in the Senate today by demanding it go over 1 day. The Senate then adjourned before La Follette could start a filibuster attempt, which is threatened for tomorrow. No action was taken in the House. Stone voted in the Senate committee against the war resolution, which is all ready. Wilson's plan is to assemble 500,000 men under a universal service system to add to the Army and National Guard and make a total of 1,200,000. Washington, April 3rd. President Wilson last night urged Congress, assembled in joint session, to declare a state of war existing between the United States and Germany. In a dispassionate but unmeasured denunciation of the course of the Imperial German government, which he characterized as a challenge to all mankind, the president declared that neutrality no longer was feasible or desirable where the peace of the world was involved. The president said war with Germany would involve practically cooperation with the governments now at war with Germany, including liberal financial credits. He urged the raising of 500,000 men, chosen on the principle of universal liability to service. The president made it clear that no action was being taken against the Austrian government and other nations allied with Germany. From Wilson's speech, the present German submarine warfare is a warfare against mankind. It is a war against all nations. There has been no discrimination. The challenge is to all mankind. Our motive will not be revenge, but only the vindication of human rights, of which we are only a single champion. Armed neutrality, it now appears, is impracticable, because submarines are in effect outlaws. When used as the German submarines have been used, they must be dealt with upon sight, if dealt with at all. There is one choice we cannot make. We will not choose the path of submission and suffer the most sacred rights of our nation and our people to be ignored or violated. Neutrality is no longer feasible or desirable where the peace of the world is involved and the freedom of its peoples. We have no quarrel with the German people. It was not upon their impulse that their government acted in entering this war. A steadfast concert for peace can never be maintained except by a partnership of democratic nations. No autocratic government could be trusted to keep faith within it or observe its covenants. We are now about to accept the gauge of battle with this natural foe to liberty and shall, if necessary, spend the whole force of the nation to check and nullify its pretensions and its power. The world must be made safe for democracy. Its peace must be landed upon the trusted foundations of political liberty. We have no selfish ends to serve. We desire no conquest, no dominion. We are but one of the champions of the rights of mankind. His address sent to Berlin. The objects of the United States in entering the war, the president said, were to vindicate the principles of peace and justice against selfish and autocratic power. The president's address was sent in full to Germany by a German official news agency for publication in that country. The text also went to England, and a summary of its contents was sent around the world to other nations. To carry on an effective warfare against the German government, which he characterized as a natural foe to liberty, the president recommended utmost practical cooperation in counsel and action with the governments already at war with Germany, extension of liberal financial credits to those governments so that the resources of America may be added so far as possible to their organization, mobilization of all the material resources of the country, full equipment of the Navy, particularly for means of dealing with submarine warfare, an army of at least 500,000 men, based on the principle of universal liability to service, and the authorization of additional increments of 500,000 each as they are needed or can be handled in training. Raising necessary money for the United States government so far as possible without borrowing and on the basis of equitable taxation. All preparations, the president urged, should be made in such way as not to check the flow of war supplies to the nations already in the field against Germany. Measures to accomplish all these ends, the president told Congress, would be presented with the best thought of the executive departments, and he besought consideration for them in that light.